Welcome to Fairfax. Welcome to Conversations That Count, the program that is supported by Fairfax County Republican Committee. Fairfax County Republican Committee is a diverse and open political committee that welcomes people with similar political interests. Please join us as we continue to build a Republican Party in Fairfax County and Fairfax City that is diverse, open, and inclusive to everyone like you and me. I am Srilekha Phale, Vice Chair of Campaigns and Elections. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, a celebration of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the United States. In the midst of a difficult year like this, we would like to reflect on the traditions of leadership, resilience, and courage shown by API communities. In order to do that, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome our own local Asian American leader, Fairfax City Councilman, Mr. Sang Yi. Councilman Sang Yi is currently serving his second term on the Fairfax City Council. He's first elected in 2018, and he got re-elected recently in 2020. Councilman Yi is one of city's first ever Asian Americans and foreign-born council members. Each time he was elected as a top vote getter in multi-candidate fields. Mr. Yi is a strong advocate for keeping tax burdens low on residents and is a leading voice for the preservation of the city's character and family-friendly environment. During his tenure in office, he has also championed reduced regulatory burdens for non-profit organizations serving our residents, supported our veterans community, promoted STEM education in schools, and successfully augmented a mental health and suicide prevention program for our students at Fairfax High School. He's also a strong advocate for victims of child abuse and for those with mobility impairments and disabilities. He understands that as an elected official, he represents the residents to government and not the other way around, which I truly treasure. Councilman Yi has a deep gratitude and respect for the American dream, which motivated him to dedicate his life to public service in pursuit of growing opportunities for others. He's an experienced government professional. He currently serves as a senior congressional aide focused on oversight of our US government at the highest levels to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse. He began his career in the executive branch at a Defense Department intelligence agency. He also serves as a lieutenant commander in the US Navy Reserve. He's a graduate of the US Merchant Marine Academy, the US Naval War College, and the George Washington University Law School. As you can see from the introduction, Sang is very accomplished, and we are very grateful that he has agreed to spend time with us this evening. I also would like to bring in my co-host, Vincent Xavier, and an immigrant Republican leader and a staunch advocate for common sense conservatism. He has a vision and a plan for broad and expanded Republican tent and is working aggressively to achieve that. Vincent, please go ahead and take it from here.
Thank you, Srilekha, for that generous introduction. And Sang, hello again. We are so excited to have you here. We have met several times in the past, and I always looked at you with utmost admiration for what you are able to accomplish in Fairfax City, and that is to win a seat on the Executive Council in a highly liberal Northern Virginia jurisdiction. And that is twice in a row. So we will get into the details of your winning tradition and techniques later, but for the benefit of our audience, can you elaborate the relationship between Fairfax City and Fairfax County administrations, especially regarding the tax treatment, the Board of Supervisors, and the school board? Does Fairfax City have all of these in parallel to Fairfax County, or we share any facilities, resources, or administrative body? Other towns in the area, such as Herndon, Vienna, and Falls Church, do they have similar relationships with the county, or is there any difference? So if you can elaborate on these points, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Well, Thank you so much, Vincent and Sri, for having me. And I really appreciate what you guys do with this programming and what you do for the party in the local area here. I think that your conversations that counts are deeply substantive and really informative for people, Republicans and non-Republicans alike. These are the conversations we really need to have in our discourse. We need to have in our communities so that people understand what's going on. And we talk about information, and we talk about sometimes inaccurate information. And I think people come to hear conversations like these with you guys and walk away with a lot more enriched. So I appreciate it very much. It's a great question about the way the city of Fairfax works. So the city of Fairfax is its own municipality. It's geographically in the center of the county, of course. And then in addition to that, inside the city bounds, there's actually more county land, which really accounts for the county courthouse. And there's a few properties as well. Because we're our own municipality, we have our own tax rate. We have our own police department, fire department, and technically we actually have our own city school system. Uniquely, and probably I think the only municipality in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, we actually have a contract or what we call school services agreement with the Fairfax County Public Schools, where they provide the curriculum, instruction, and personnel and transportation for our students while we own the buildings. This agreement is I think about 50 years old or so. But it's not like the towns like Herndon or Vienna, but it's more like Falls Church City, which is also its independent municipality. However, they do really have their own city school system. We do boast one of the lowest tax rates in Northern Virginia, and I'll have to put that in there for even all my friends in the county. As much as I love you guys, the city has a much better tax rate. Our property tax rate is 1075, so it's hard to beat that. But
so that is your city council is equivalent to the board of supervisors in the county.
That's right.
Okay. And how about the voter system? Because when I ran for school board, that's when I first realized that the people live in the city, they don't really vote in the county election, school board election.
Right. So the residents of the city of Fairfax can vote for the Commonwealth's attorney, because that's a county-wide and area-wide seat, as well as the clerk of the court, John Fry, who's a great guy. And we have in the city of Fairfax our own school board, and we actually have 6 precincts here, but nobody represents by precinct. We all are at large.
Okay, the reason that I wanted to bring these conversations, because we have a special interest in promoting these conversations to the minority communities, the immigrant communities, and they don't really have a clue how the local administrations are run. So when a person like me or Sri Lanka ran, that's the first time the Indian community got know, okay, there is a board of supervisors, there is a school board. So this knowledge is the first thing where they understand that their decisions matter and their decisions can change things, and they can also become part of this. So that is why we wanted to hear from you how exactly this is configured. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Sang, I think sorry. So Sang, I think I'll kind of elaborate on some of my immigrant experience. For the first decade of my life, I really didn't understand the difference between the role of the school board and the role of board of supervisor. What's the difference between city council and mayor and so on and so forth. That's how naive immigrant population is. I wouldn't say all of them, but at least majority of immigrant population. And that's because as immigrants, I think we come here for economic interests, and we are very ingrained in trying to help our kids go to schools, get good education, and that's our focus. So I must admit, we are very proud that you as an immigrant, you've gotten where you have gotten. So I guess this is kind of going to be my question. We all know you as an Asian immigrant politician on the Republican side who have won repeatedly. And as we all can appreciate, politics is the most difficult place for immigrants to do well. Would you elaborate some on your immigrant experience in politics? What age did you come here? From where? Were you not impacted by the racial minority stereotype in schools and colleges that push immigrant children to become advocates for utopian liberalism and wokeness? What do you recommend immigrant parents like yours to do to nurture future leaders from the Asian American community, especially on the conservative side of politics? I know that's like a lot of questions into one, but as an immigrant parent, I would like to embed some kind of politics, especially conservative side of politics, into my children versus utopian liberalism and wokeness. How do we embed that into our kids?
Sure. No, I appreciate that question because I can tell it comes from a very sincere place. You said there was a lot of questions mixed in there, but that's because you have a lot of it bottled up inside, and it's been a long time coming. So I understand. And it's not traditional for Asian Americans to want to run for office. It really isn't. The stereotypes sometimes are true, where parents, immigrant Asian parents like mine, they said, you know, you can be a doctor or you can be a lawyer. And that was really the two choices. And I grew up probably the first half of my childhood not realizing there were other occupations in the world. You know, God forbid I said I wanted to be an artist or something, you know. And, you know, when I told my parents that I wanted to go into politics, I remember my mother saying to me, why would you want to do something like that? And I said, well, you know, I went to law school and I don't think I want to actually practice law. I want to make changes in other ways. And she said, but that's why you went to law school. And so, you know, it's something that they've gotten accustomed to. But you're right. In culturally speaking, that's a challenge for us. And for me, like especially as an Asian American member of the community, I find it as an obligation to mentor and help recruit young people into the political process. And I think there is a discussion about, you know, people being confused about what councils do, what do city councils do? And one of my favorite things I do actually as a city council member is I get asked often from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to come and do the presentation so that they can receive their badges, their civic badges. And the questions you hear from 6 or 7-year-olds are really amazing. And then you think, man, more adults should listen to these questions that they're being asked because they understand very quickly what government means to them. And I have to say, we watch politics a lot in America, right? And we watch it on TV, we watch national news, and people get very upset or emotional about things. And you realize these are very important issues, but some of these issues are occurring more than 4,000 or 5,000 miles away from your home. Right here in your backyard on local levels, you know, your school board, your city council, or your board of supervisors, they're making decisions that's going to literally impact something that's going to happen in your backyard or in your school, in your child's school and schooling and education, Monday through Friday for the next 12, 13 years, you know. And we talk about, you know, the impact on that and the impression. And you mentioned some of this about, you know, the viewpoints that we come kind of have, I want to say suffer through, but we have to tolerate, right? And interestingly, that's a ironic word because I feel like sometimes there's an intolerance to other ideas in our area. But I'd say that's why it's so important for the immigrant population in the community to really get involved in their local politics. Run for these school board seats, run for the city council seats, run for school supervisor seats. All of these things, that impacts people's lives every day. And the more I think that Asian Americans are involved and out there, the more Asian Americans will actually run for office. It's a lot scarier to think that you're going to do something for the first time. You know, when I got elected, it was incredible because the city of Fairfax, as historic as this city is, until I was elected, there had not even been one minority elected, except one, 50 years before my election date.
Wow.
50 years before I got first elected in 1968 was the last time. There's an African-American gentleman who happened to be the same age when I got elected. And his name was Henry Minor. And he only served for one term. And I found newspaper articles about him. And, you know, he was treated very poorly. They were throwing bricks at his car, you know, with racial slurs on his car, right here in Fairfax, you know, just 50 years ago. And so when you fast forward and you think, how did it take half a century before someone who looked like me got elected here? You got to look, you have to wonder, and especially because the way that our politics are in this region and how dominant the liberal and Democrat politicians are here, why hasn't that happened? Right? So I just, to me, it's not really just about partisan politics. It's about making sure that your community rises. And I think that if we don't make our community rise based on their merits, and you just want to pick people because of their color, guess what? It'll take 50 years before you see progress.
Yeah, very well said, Sang. That's why I think you're such an inspiration. And I think the more you speak up, the more you are part of these conversations. I think you started off saying it very well, saying that these conversations does matter. I mean, I see that now 20 people are listening, and hopefully 2,000 people will listen after. And local politics matter. And the more immigrants listen to it, the more things will change. So, and I was actually part of a healthcare panel about Asian Americans recently, and I was saying that and in Forbes, I think out of 500 Forbes companies, there are only 23 CEOs who are Asian Americans. How is that possible out of 500 Forbes? I mean, that should not be the case at all. So it's very important that we look around and say we don't need to pick based on the color, but the diversity does matter. And we just really need to rise up to the occasion and participate in the process. Thank you.
Sang, just a side question, in that particular question. So when you decided to run for office, were you already part of the Republican Party, or you just decided because you watched the issues and you really wanted to run? Because you now you are a kind of a very proud symbol for us. We project everywhere. Okay, we have one person here, who has won. But which came first, your party affiliation or your interest for running?
Well, unlike a lot of politicians who will tell you, well, I never thought about running for office, or I never thought about serving that way, and it just happened. That's not my story. Candidly, when I was, I guess Sri had asked earlier what age we immigrated. I was 4 years old. I was just about to turn 5 when my family and I moved from South Korea. And South Korea is a very homogenous country, especially in the early 80s. And I was what they call the latchkey kid. My father worked at a t-shirt printing factory, and my mother, so we lived in Maryland, and she took a bus to the metro, and then the metro all the way to Southeast DC to work in a neighborhood grocery store behind bulletproof glass, and took 2 more buses after that. And then they were gone all day. I would walk home and back and forth from school by myself. And, my parents didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any English. They put me in this ESOL program, which I think it's developed leaps and bounds from when I was in it in the early 80s. And it was so bad. I mean, at the time I remember in my ESOL class, it was me, who was Korean, and then a Chinese student, and then 2 Hispanic students. And the 2 Hispanic students spoke Spanish to each other the whole day. And the Chinese student and I just looked at each other confused because he didn't speak any Korean, and he kept speaking to me in Chinese, and I didn't speak any Chinese. And so I actually learned a lot of English from watching TV. And, what's so crazy is I couldn't understand any of the English on cartoons because of the high-pitched noises and all the fast speaking. So I actually found the Andy Griffith Show. And the Andy Griffith Show, if you remember him, he spoke very slow with a Southern drawl, and I could understand him better. And in my 5-year-old, 6-year-old mind, I didn't know, the difference. And I hadn't met a lot of Caucasians and Americans at the time. And in the evenings, Ronald Reagan would come on television. I actually thought that that was the same man, that Andy Griffith and Ronald Reagan were exactly I thought during the day he was a sheriff, and at night he was the president, or he was this amazing politician. And they both spoke, and Ronald Reagan spoke in a very deliberate, great cadence, and I could understand them. And I learned English watching those 2 men. So as I grew up, I remember thinking, when I grew up, I think it's just a noble thing that Ronald Reagan serves his community during the day, and at night he leads the country. And I said, I want to do the same thing. So as I got older, by the time I was in probably late elementary school, I was a weird kid who already knew how many members of Congress there were and what the districts meant. And I told my immigrant parents that when I grew up, I want to be in office like this. And they said, what is wrong with you? Don't worry, you'll just get a law school or med school. And so I've always thought about it, and I've always wanted. And I suppose maybe Ronald Reagan influenced me early on, and that's why I was a Republican, even in a very liberal upbringing in my community and neighborhood.
Wow, wonderful. That's great to hear. This is the first time I'm hearing about Ronald Reagan from the eyes of a 5-year-old. So he was a great communicator, not just for the politicians, but not for adults, but even for children. You understood him better than anybody else. So that's great to hear. Anyway, let me get back into a serious question here. So if you look into the issues that consumed our lives in 2020, during the unrest of 2020 after George Floyd's death, all Americans were exposed to the divisive nature of the Black Lives Matter movement. We now know that the organization was founded on anti-family and Marxist principles. This movement has brought many disturbing trends from the far left into the mainstream American politics. What is your general opinion of what has happened? And what do we have to do now for the nation to heal better?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I from the outset, let's be honest, America is the greatest country in the world. There is nowhere in the world that a family like mine, like my parents, come here and live that real American dream. So I mean, it's an absolute truism. My parents, like I said, they had a pretty hard time in the beginning, and they've become pretty successful small business owners. And this thing we call the American dream, that doesn't exist anywhere else. Okay. Yes, my family, I have been, and I'm sure you have been subjected to discrimination and racism. That happens here. That's true. That's undeniable, and it's not something we should accept in our society, and we should do our best to eradicate it. Absolutely. But in the process of it, while we're criticizing America to make it better, that's what we're trying to do here in our democracy. I don't stand for people literally trashing my community, my neighborhood, buildings, people, or our country over it. I say this a lot. My parents really lived this American dream. I challenge you to find another country where they have a phrase like that. You think that there are people in China who say there's a China dream? You think that there are people in North Korea who says there's a North Korean dream or a Libyan dream? The only dreams that those people have are to leave those countries and come here, okay? And I have met North Korean refugees who are asylees. They received asylum. It's incredible. There's no country like this, and so we need to keep that in mind about when we talk about these like racial tensions in our country, and of course the horrible history of American slavery. That's nobody supports that. I don't know anybody who supports that. Yep. And I refuse, and I think especially as Republicans, we should refuse to let anybody try to paint us with that, because that's just not true. My family only has less than 4 decades of history in this country. That doesn't mean I don't want to ever learn about the history of this country, and that doesn't mean that I will make sure that my children who are 7 and 5 years old never learn about the history of their country. It's important to know even the bad and the ugly so that we can avoid it in the future. Exactly. That's the real danger, right? And I think what you see with Black Lives Matter as the movement versus the organization, I do distinguish those two. And I think that's really important. People will always try to capitalize off of a crisis, and it's really a shame. I've seen people, like I have in our community when we had marches going on. I've gone and visited with people who are participating, and some of them have very sincere concerns, and I think that's real, and we should have those conversations. Those are not the people who are throwing rocks through small businesses and windows and harming. I guess they want racial justice, yet they will destroy an Asian-owned small business, whose bottom line is so margin thin that once you shatter their window, you might just actually put them out of business.
Exactly.
They didn't think about that, did they? Because they don't care. That's the real issue for them. I don't think is racial justice, right? It's capitalizing off of a crisis or a chaos, and that's the real distinction. I just, it's something that's really personal to me because, especially we're talking about Asian American Heritage Month, and people talk about stopping Asian hate. Let's talk about that, right? And just because people don't throw rocks through windows and burn things down and set cars on fire, doesn't mean they're not hurting either. In our community, what do we have? We have actually almost 20%, almost a quarter of people are Asians in our Northern Virginia region here.
Exactly.
Think about the soft bigotries everyday Asians face now. What do we want to talk about? Thomas Jefferson High School? We want to talk about education curriculums from math? You want to talk about, how did the Harvard admissions work? These are things that every day happen, and it happen to everyday people. And the media doesn't go crazy about that. Media doesn't cover that 24/7. So I ask people always to think more inwardly about what's really going on in the world, and not to be not to be distracted just by the flames of immediate passion or things like that, but think deeply about these issues.
Yeah, and my next question was actually a sub-question to this, and that was on the Asian hate that we see. So the violence against Asian Americans is on the rise in mostly Democrat-controlled cities. The left blames it on President Trump and white racism. However, we know for a fact that those who attack Asians on the streets of Democrat-controlled cities are black males, mostly with liberal political views and criminal history. So Democrat leaders who rule these places are not ready to address the real issue at all due to their woke mentality and inhibitions. So as law-abiding Asian Americans and African American leaders, how do we address this law and order issue without making it look like a racial issue between two races? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think policing has become an extreme challenge. And my heart really goes out to the men and women who want to serve in uniform. It's a especially sensitive and challenging time to serve. And you talk to police officers. I've never met a police officer where I've had a conversation and they said to me, I just really wanted to be a police officer because I hate minorities and I wanted to beat them up and arrest them. That just doesn't happen. And I'm not saying that some people have inherent biases and racism, in their bones. I'm not saying that all police officers have, completely clear souls. But the fact of the matter is, when you paint an entire service in one light, you really are throwing out all the good with the bad. And so I think that we ought to focus a little bit more on what is it that contributes to some of these crime rates, or what is it that contributes to the violence that you see in these neighborhoods? And I have to say, I think it has to do a lot with earlier childhood and education. And for an area where we boast one of the best education systems in the country, right? We're teaching our children that they're victims. We're teaching our children that certain people, because of their color, should belong in this box or this container. And I'll give you a case in point. In the city of Fairfax, we have a lot of discussion, as they do in the county and the region, about affordable housing. And affordable housing is a real issue. We live in a very high expensive market area. Well, what does affordable housing mean? Is it subsidized housing? What is it? Are you trying to let people buy a house that looks just like your $1 million mansion next door? What is it? And I asked these questions, and I want to have a sincere discussion. And I remember one day I got an email from somebody who was an elderly white, Democrat male. And he told me that he heard my comments about affordable housing and said that I was racist. And the email continued on to say that I was racist because I did not care, apparently because I questioned these things about affordable housing and how it would work. I must not care about Black Americans and Black residents. And I did not respond, obviously, but this was case in point. That person had such a stereotype in his mind that only Black people could live in affordable housing, that in the process of calling me a racist, he really showed his true colors.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is going on with some of our, when we talk about education in early childhood. When you tell people that you are going to be poor because you look this way, and so we need to protect you, and you tell them that their whole childhood, and then you tell them the next generation, and they teach their children that, what kind of community do you end up with? I think we all know.
No, that is really wonderful, Sang. You're speaking your mind. You know, we touched upon this before we started the meeting about being a career politician, and I'm sure from my heart of hearts that people like you is what is going to make a difference happen, because we have to address these issues at the root. If we don't address it, then we have no solution. People will keep on talking for the sake of getting votes or getting elected, but that's not going to solve these problems. And thank you for that courage.
Sang, moving on to our early days of Biden administration, as you know, he's presented racial justice and racial equality. They're the new buzzwords for the entire executive branch. There were marching orders governing everything from immigration policy to cabinet nominations to affirmative actions, even in higher education. I'm sure Vincent can attest to this. In our WhatsApp messages, every time an Indian or South Asian gets nominated, there are these congratulatory messages that goes on. And myself and Vincent don't agree with it because we believe in qualification. Just because that person is South Asian, we don't believe that that person is the right person to do the job. And we should all congratulate each other and pat on our backs if that person is not the right person for the job. It has been quite frustrating to us that believe in equality for all rather than special treatment for some, just based on the skin color. In California, legislation was introduced that would have made discrimination based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin legal. Such measures would have been considered outrageous, unconstitutional, and illegal. Even 10 years ago, we had Yingma a few weeks back in our conversations that count that kind of talked about this issue that happened in Oakland as well. So what has happened to America? I mean, this is not the America even I came to 2 decades back. As an Asian immigrant and minority community leader, how do you see such developments? I mean, where do you see that we are going? Is this something that you anticipated even happening when you were in college? Or is this a new trend? Where do you see us going from here?
This is something that I've always said that when I ran for office, my mindset, and still now, is that I view my job as someone who's trying to increase opportunities for people. And at a bare minimum, we need to have equal opportunities for people. But if you listen to what I just said, that has nothing to do with equal outcomes. I don't believe in, I want people to grow at their own pace. I don't think that government should be telling you where you belong. I mean, that's the whole discussion here, right? About racism as well. Nobody should be telling anyone because of the way they look or, their skin color, what they should be doing or where they belong. And yet, why do we have a system where we're saying, let's make sure that your results are right here? Because somebody, I don't know, some bureaucrat decided, but a team of bureaucrats and some academics decided that, well, people with that hair color should really be around this level. That's scary stuff.
Yes.
I don't mean to exaggerate it, but I have to say, over the time, and I guess when we talked about TJ earlier, the thing that bothers me isn't that and I want to be very clear about this, the thing that bothers me about the TJ's admissions process now that they're trying to change isn't that it would reduce Asians, right? I'm not so much concerned about that. What I'm concerned about is that it reduces merit-based admissions.
Exactly.
And if they only had 100 spots and it goes to the top 100 scores and they happen to be all kids who are green colored skin, you know, that's a school for gifted and talented kids. And it turns out, you know, these green colored kids do really great on these tests. And you think the test is bad, then change the test.
Exactly.
But don't change the process to be like, well, we need to make sure there are purple kids in there. We need to make sure that there are, you know, orange kids. That's not merit-based admissions. And what happens is that to the core of your question, I think it starts degrading what makes us so great in America. I like competition. I think people should compete. And there are people who can't. And there are people who need extra help. And you know what? We have systems in place to help those people. Like literally, we provide special needs for people who cannot fend for themselves. But that's a different case.
Exactly. And I think part of me feels that we don't want to accept the fact that we want to, as school board members, that we want to focus on providing that extra help. We don't want to go that extra mile to work hard to provide that policies to reduce the achievement gap. So we just reduce the standards. So we don't want to do that extra work. And
Exactly.
we don't want to put in that effort. So we may as well just reduce the standards. It's easier thing to do. And I think one thing that I tell in Management 101 is you don't need an extra MBA degree from Harvard University to just lay off employees. That's no brainer. How do you mitigate the risk instead of just laying off employees is what you need your MBA degree for.
And Sri, that's like, you know, so I went to a military service academy and it was ingrained in us, you know, that your team is only as weak as your weakest link or only as strong as your weakest link. And, you know, when you're a military officer and you look at your people, you find the ones who are having problems and who are struggling and your focus goes to them a lot. You know, you want them to be better because your team is only as strong as your weakest link. Mm-hmm. What we have right now in America, I don't know if it's a laziness, and it's not just Fairfax County. I think it's just generally like the culture. It's like, well, that person is struggling and they must be hurting, so we have to bring everybody else down so that this person doesn't feel as bad. That's not a recipe for greatness. You know, that's literally a recipe for mediocrity.
There you go.
And I think that Americans don't like that. You know, you talked about California earlier, and I talk about the American dream, and you know, the only time I've ever heard of California dreaming, you know, is when people want to leave now. So they're moving to Texas, they're moving to other states, and they're not even coming to Virginia, really. You know, and that should be also telling.
And also saying, I think what makes America great and what I realized when I came 2 decades back is you really don't have to get into TJ if you're not strong in science and math. I mean, what makes America great is if you are great in art, you become an artist. If you're not great in education, you go to vocational college and you become a plumber, and that's okay. I mean, you are the greatest plumber.
Absolutely.
You're a greatest electrician. You're a great cop. I mean, I'm a physical therapist. I'm not a surgeon, but I'm a greatest physical therapist. I'm a greatest healthcare administrator. So I'm not an entrepreneur. You know, it's like that's what makes the American dream. Why do you need to go to TJ if you are not great at science and math? Why do you need to reduce that standard?
Right.
Let the kids that are great at science and math go to that, but I'll go to probably a music industry if I'm great at that. I mean, I think that's what is crushing me. That is what is crushing.
That's the beauty of America, right? Is that your original station in life isn't necessarily your final station in life here. You're not stuck there, right? And it doesn't matter. Like, you're right. Like, you don't have to go to TJ to be successful. You don't have to go to Harvard to be successful. But the reason that those exist are because for some people, that is where they belong, you know, because of their talents or whatnot. And to take it away from them, really, I think is an insult to everybody else.
Exactly.
Even if you're not attending those schools or you didn't have intentions to attend those schools, it's insulting to everybody else because it's saying that well, you know what? Maybe everybody should go to TJ and you're just not smart enough. So I'm going to help you out so you can go too.
Exactly.
That's an insult.
Probably I don't want to go to TJ.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to go to something else that I'm good at.
Yep, exactly. And when you talk about these issues, you both talk just now about issues that everybody, all of us can understand very easily. So it's common sense. The phrase that you used, or you're as strong as your weakest link. It's just common sense. So if they're still promoting that, the way I see it, you understand what we are talking about. We are as strong as the weakest link. So if you're promoting that, then your interest is not in the future of this country. You have some other interest which is contradicting with our interest. So I'm not really, this is not negotiable. This is like, you're advocating for a decline of America. That's what you're doing, in effect. And when I talk about it, I'm all of a sudden, people call you racist. And, I have been called, you said you were called racist, and I have been called a racist by Democrats for wearing a MAGA hat. So in Democrat minds, Asians are not colored people anymore because they are generally successful. So all of this is ludicrous and laughable. And yet the media largely ignores it. I'm curious, what is your insight? Why is the media behaving like this? Is it a business reasons for them? Why they're, kind of dealing with this, blatantly clear common sense issue and taking a side and really advocating for the decline of the country? Why they do this? Any thoughts?
Well, I'm not an expert in journalism, but I have to say that the media that I see today isn't really information and news source. It's entertainment for people. It's outrage generators, and there's very little meat to the reporting now, and it's more commentary. And I do encourage people to read more of their local papers. I know that doesn't sound as fun, but I actually had a conversation with a friend the other day about this, and I said, when people used to read newspapers more, even with the biases, I mean, don't get me started about the Washington Post and things like that, but even when people read the newspapers, when you read stuff, you have to picture and imagine some of this stuff by yourself, even after someone described it to you. When you see things on TV, I think people just kind of passively digest all of it. And so I think it's easier for someone to get sucked in by MSNBC and just say, yes, and confirmation bias, and then go out and just regurgitate the same points. Whereas even if they read the Washington Compost or Washington Post, whatever you want to call it, they'll say, well, I did read between the lines and I noticed that the journalist didn't say this, and there's actually discussions about it. And it's not just a bunch of people nodding their heads. And I think that's really important. And then when you kick it to the local papers though, yeah, maybe sometimes the writing's not as fancy, or maybe it's not as exciting of stories, but you will find out about what's going on in your community. And maybe it's a sidewalk. And again, it's not as exciting as, Russian scandals or whatever you have, but it's very important to people. And so to the extent that people are watching this, I really recommend that they grab their local paper and give it a try.
That is a very good observation. Actually, in the generational way of looking at journalism, we are not really getting better. We used to be better in reading newspapers and coming to our own judgments. But these days, the media is kind of controlling it, not really providing us any news. They're controlling our thought. So we're not getting any better. It's a very good thought.
So, from what you say, do you think there is still hope that we can get our country back, where the notion of all men are created equal is a fundamental principle that is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, reaffirmed in our Gettysburg Address and celebrated in Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech? What do you think?
We have to, Shri. We have to. And if we didn't believe that, I don't think the three of us would be spending time talking about any of this right now. And I surely wouldn't really sacrifice my family time and, being, all the time I spend away from my family, my wife and my kids, so that I can serve on the city council. I wouldn't do any of this if I didn't believe that. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the same for everybody. There are some people who are elected who don't believe that. And I think that they believe this as a job. They believe this as a title. they believe this as an honor and a special treat for themselves. And clearly they have a very different understanding of representative government and the republic than I hold. And so you have those types of people who I think are detractors from getting us there, the ideal situation you're talking about. And so it's more and more important that people who have the right mindset get out there and challenge those people, challenge their seats and say, you know what, I think you're done holding that position. One thing I always tell my daughter, she's 7 now, she just turned 7 this like 13 days ago. And when I first got, so I ran for the House of Delegates, you remember, in 2015. And so she was 1 year old and she went door knocking with me, and she started shaking hands at 4th of July parades with me. And so she's been ingrained in this for better or worse. And I remember one day we were driving in the city of Fairfax, and she saw City of Fairfax logo on a worker's truck, and she said from the back seat, from her car seat, she said, "Daddy, I see a Fairfax City logo on that car." And I said, "Oh yeah, that's a public works vehicle." And she said, "So does that person work for you?" And I said, "Work for me?" She said, "Well, you're city council." And I thought, well, this is an amazing thing for a little kid to say. I pulled over the car. And I stopped the car and I looked back at her while she's sitting in her little 5-point harness car seat. And I said, "Evie, let me tell you something about Daddy and being on city council. There are 24,000 people in this city. Do you even know what that number means?" And she said, "No." And I said, "It's like 100 billion. It's 100 gazillion," because she used to say that a lot. That was the biggest number she could think of, 100 gazillion. I said, "It's like 100 gazillion people. And every single one of those people are Daddy's bosses." I was like, I work for every single one of those people, including that person who's a utility driver. I said, and to me, like, that's what really strikes the core of all of this. A lot of elected officials of all stripes in all areas. Some people just don't have that mindset, that they think that once they're elected, everybody else works for them. They think that all 24,000 residents, or how many constituents they have, work for them. And, I think there's nothing more un-American than that. And so it's really important to me that people understand that, and that people fight for that, and that people urge people who view similarly to us and hold that kind of philosophy, that those are the people who should be representing us. Because when I sit up on that dais, I'm not representing myself. I sit in that chair, I think about that chair, and I think about 24,000 faces scrambling through my head, and 24,000 lives, and 24,000 dinner table conversations about what's happening in their house, and how they're struggling this month to make rent, or to pay their mortgage, or what's going to happen with their kids' schooling, or when their kids are going to go back to school, or all these things, or someone's ill in their house and how are they going to pay for their cancer treatments. I think about those people. I think about that when I do it. And so, it's really, really important, I think, that we keep that in mind at all times. And I think that if we have those types of mindsets, Sri, long answer to your short question, yeah, we'll get there.
Thank you. That is immensely hopeful. Thank you.
No, that is great, Sang. You brought tears into my eyes when you said what you told. What you stopped your car and told your daughter. I wish, our leaders had that same attitude. A good percentage of them was, good enough. Not all of them. We would have been in a much better shape. And I'm really glad that, for your daughter, she got a very good lesson, in that young age, what exactly service means. I'm a root cause kind of a guy. Whenever I see a problem, I try to find out what exactly is the root cause of this issue. So when I look at the wokeness that is happening all over the place, when real good people, men and women, they start talking this language. Some of my very close friends telling that, "Hey, brother Vincent, don't worry about some of the property damage, because property you can make again, but they're burning the stuff for whatever the past sins, and these people are responsible adults." So some people tell me, some of my close friends, liberal friends, of course, talk to me like that. I'm like thinking, what has happened to these people? So I hear that this communist ideology, the communist philosophy, it was kind of in a coup attempt for decades to sabotage our system. I don't have any, kind of documented proof for all these things. I'm just wondering, you being a thinker, a politician with a purpose and trying to understand, do you see some kind of an agenda like that for a long term that is working, that brought us here, especially with the CRT education and everything that is happening in schools? Do you see something like that as a root cause of these problems?
That's a tough one, Vincent, because I don't know if I can pinpoint any one thing. I think that it's a collection of uh, the way that people are teaching our kids. It's a collection of the way that we treat each other in the workplace. It's a collection of how we have civil discourse or uncivil discourse about our politics or about policy. And so I think it's an entire thing, you got to look at the totality of what's going on. And you're right, I don't like it either. And I think that's why we have a lot of resurgence of different types of candidates too, right, running for office. Whether even on the Democrat side or Republican side, you just see like a different type of politics going on. I'm personally really excited about our Republican ticket for statewide. Talk about people who have the mind and heart to serve. I've known Jason Miyares for a long time, and he's a great guy. And Winston Sears is a very exciting and dynamic person. And Glenn Youngkin, I actually got to sit down with him for about an hour and a half the day that he actually announced. And, he's someone who I thought to myself, this guy, he has the right heart for this, because he's not seeking a title. He's not seeking, like what we were talking about earlier, he's not trying to find a position, he doesn't need that for his affirmation. He's not trying to be famous. And I think that's really important. So, but you get these types of good candidates going, Vincent. I think, they're not going to solve the root problem, but all the symptoms will start going away. And I think it'll eventually get better.
Okay, that's a very good thought as well. I want to ask you about this this ticket, which is the most diverse ticket that we ever had. Glenn Youngkin, an outsider businessman, kind of got frustrated with what's going on and jumped into politics. And a Cuban immigrant's son running for Attorney General, and Winsome Sears. I'm so proud of her. I was just watching her campaign. In a very crowded field of candidates, she came out winning, successfully. So this is the time that we have, in Virginia, for us to really kind of fight back with this wokeness, with a very diverse ticket we have, and a very powerful, messengers. They're all of them very strong messengers. So how can we use this energy to penetrate the Asian American community? It was one question I had for you. I mean, I know we are working hard in the Indian community, because generally people think of Republicans as, branded as racist white people. But now we have a diverse ticket here. So how to promote it to the maximum level? Do you have any thoughts, suggestions for us, party leaders?
I can sum it all up in one word: sincerity. We, as people who've been involved in politics, and especially as Asian Americans, what we've seen so many campaigns and candidates come in and swoop in a week before election day and say, well, I'm going to win all the Hispanic votes. And say, how are you going to do that? It's like, well, I'm going to go to a Hispanic event. Well, you're going to go to one Hispanic event. It's just, the whole community is just going to trust you. And I always think it's so funny when candidates think that way, because I said, would you do that with sportsmen's groups? Would you do that with church groups? Would you do that with the Lions Club or these nonprofit groups? No, they said, well, I have relationships. I said, right, you have to develop relationships, and that takes sincerity. And one of the things I remember when I actually ran for delegate, there's a precinct out near Centerville. Every Republican has lost this precinct, by almost 20 percentage points. Mm-hmm. Every Republican. I don't care if it was a presidential race or what have you, all the way down to delegate and supervisor races. When I ran for delegate, even though I didn't prevail ultimately, I beat my incumbent opponent, my entrenched incumbent opponent, by 11 percentage points. I swung that precinct almost 31 points. And everyone said, how did you do that? How could that happen? Well, it's a pretty heavily Asian precinct, and they said, oh, so because you're Asian, you got the votes. And I said, no, you have to develop the relationships with sincerity. The people have to trust you. You know, I happen to have some roots with them as a fellow member of that community, but it's not something you can just swoop in and pick up. So I really, you know, I'm big on this, about preaching this to all of our candidates and our party and everybody. You know, you have to try every day. You have to try every day. You have to try everybody. You know, and that's the way you get this sincerity, and you get the true relationship building, and that's how you win these communities.
You know, and when we look at the current race in the 40th delegate district, one other Korean American, Harold Pyon, is running. So maybe we can have some momentum in this direction. I have been to that church, you know, that big church, the Korean church in Centerville. I was so amazed, you know, the number of people there, and you know how much we were able to interact with them just by being there just one day. And Sri, you were also there. So I hope, you know, we can bring that aspect of from being from the community and that sincerity, and make, you know, one more win possible in the 40th delegate district.
Sang, you actually said that something that I actually preach all the time, saying that there is so much going on in immigrant communities and temples, gurudwaras, in our Adams Center, mosques, community centers, Rotary clubs, in our food communities. I mean, there is so much going on, and we just really need to build partnerships. We are very sincere at heart. It's a matter of going out there and doing outreach communities. And we can't do that in October. We really have to build partnerships, and we are actually sincere by heart. We just really need to be doing that every single day, and not door knock in September, right? And that's how you build partnerships with each and every community, and each and every faith community, each and every ethnic community, for that matter. But we just can't think that we'll just go to one event and then say that, oh yeah, I have relationships with Baha'in community. No, if you know one Baha'in person doesn't mean that we have relationships with Baha'in community. We have to really build relationships with the entire community per se. So I think you spoke my mind, and thank you for kind of reiterating the same culture within the party in itself. That's the only way we can win elections. So kind of moving on to another questions, I think this is kind of repeating the tradition, but I really would like to kind of get to the bottom of this. As you know, we as Asian Americans have been consistently and disproportionately harmed by racial schemes, I say, from Harvard to Yale to California public universities. And now it's obviously happening at the backyard in TJ and other high schools and universities in Virginia, like even UVA and Virginia Tech. They regularly complain that our Asian Americans are being overrepresented at the state's public universities, and they continue to reduce the numbers as much as 50%. With all this going on against Asian Americans, the million-dollar question that I have for you, Sang, why is that vast majority of Asian Americans continue to vote Democrat? I asked this to my friends. I asked this to every Asian Americans that I come across. Are they totally unaware of what is going on? What's happening?
Let me ask this question. What percentage of the Asian American population actually votes?
That's actually a very good question too.
So if you only have a small segment of people who are already voting, and you tell me that, well, 70% of those always vote Democrat, I would say, well, what are you doing about the rest of the people who aren't voting at all?
Yeah.
Because
actually,
if we really believe that our ideas are so much better, or that our platform is more inclusive, or our platform would advocate for the success of these types of people, or provide these types of opportunities for people, if we really believe that, then these numbers can't really be true, right?
Yes.
And only because you're looking at such a small segment. And also, we have a different type of view here in Fairfax. You know, it's a little extra skewed, right? So I always challenge people to ask themselves, who are we missing? Where are all the other Asian voters that don't vote? So I guess they're not even Asian voters. They're just Asian American community members who haven't been active. And that's something that I also hope that our statewide ticket can really grow, because they'll have the resources to do that. And I think when they do that and bringing in new voters, right, and convincing them that this is in their best interest, that this is the party that this is a ticket that espouses their views. That's what's going to grow this party. That's what's going to create generations of new Republicans and create a culture shift in Northern Virginia. And let's not forget, Virginia was a red state. I mean, in our lifetimes, not that long ago. And it started becoming more purple, they say, right? And now it's become a blue state, right? Well, if we were Democrats 30 years ago, would we say that it's a lost cause? It would be foolish to do that, right? And that's another part that's such a great thing about our country, this competition of ideas and this constant tug and pull. We can't give up. We owe it to, I actually personally think that Democrats, real Democrats, I'm not talking about like, people who are going off the rails or anything like that. I'm talking about real Democrats and real Republicans. They have an obligation to our country to fight among the ideas and get the best outcome for people.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. No, thank you for being very hopeful. I think you're kind of pulling us all together and kind of keeping it extremely positive and encouraging, which is very, very good. I hope more people listen to this encouraging message.
And Sang, you brought up that point about the percentage voting. I have studied this when I ran for school board. So the Asian community, which is 20% of the entire population, voting population, we vote about 9.5 to 10% in the school board elections. So in the election that me and Sri Lanka ran in 2019, that went up like just a very small fraction. It was still like about 10%. So the mainstream population voted like 33% in that, 37% in that election. So the bottom line is, yes, we are not participating, and the school board races and the supervisor races are not along with the presidential election. That is actually more a reason why the Asians are not even aware of these elections happening. So when there is an issue, that's when they really know, oh, what's happening now, and even then they don't know who is responsible to make that change happen. So now, I just wanted to bring more attention to this one issue that we really hope that the Asian American people should be really focused during this election cycle. That's why I'm asking again. We mentioned briefly about this issue. I don't know whether you are completely aware of what happened at TJ. So they appointed an Asian American, Asian Pakistani American, Atif Kearney, as the Secretary of Education, and using him to advance measures that punish Asian students in Virginia school. He was angry when the US News and World Report ranked TJ as the best public school last year. He was angry. He wrote back to them saying that their assessment is wrong and he should not be, and TJ should not be the #1 school. So he worked with the Fairfax, FCPS superintendent to remove merit-based test as TJ to have geography-based lottery. So independent studies have proved that reducing the number of Asians at TJ is going to have marginal impact to change the Black and Hispanic numbers. This is expert statisticians have really analyzed the data based on the geography that it's not going to change the Hispanic and Black numbers much. So when they reduce Asian numbers at TJ from 70% to whatever numbers they want, most of those seats are going to go to the white students, not Black and Hispanics. So this is again, this is looking like a game, like racial discrimination against Asians, pure and simple. So just wanted to bring the attention of the audience and that and your attention, like what exactly that education secretary was doing. As an Asian, he's appointed. He's the first Asian American appointed as the education secretary, but this is what he does to the community. So any thoughts on your side about that racial nature of this? The result that we are going to have?
Well, I don't really know Atif Kearney. I couldn't really talk about him. I don't agree with these policies. Again, I think we just got to get more of the politics out of our schools and actually just put the student bodies in the schools. I don't know. I mean, it's really simple to me. There's certain things. There's certain things in life that I think really partisan politics is just off limits. And education to me is one of those things. It's such an important thing. And we talk about like growing opportunities for people. And we talk about having, producing at least equal opportunities for people. You can't do that if you don't have a good education structure. You can't do that if you don't believe in truly teaching our kids. And now what I'm seeing right now in Fairfax is that there's less at an administrative level, you know, the school board, there's less thinking about teaching these kids as compared to influencing these kids. And that's a dangerous place to be, right?
Exactly.
So what I just, you know, to me, like the focus and the priorities were so apparent when you notice that the schools were closed, you know, that the virtual learning was a disaster, especially in the beginning, you know, and some teachers, you know, they were struggling. This is just not easy for them to do. And the school board's not sitting there talking about how to create solutions for, you know, virtual learning or getting in person back. They're talking about renaming schools. They're talking about, you know, hiring some, you know, critical race theory guy. They're signing contracts with New York City Academy. The priorities are all off, you know. It's a trite saying, but you know, sometimes you just got to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is that we got to teach our kids, and we have a responsibility that they have well-rounded people, that they learn math, they learn science, they learn, you know, to go to PE, you know, we got to learn these things, and this is what's going to make our future better. And we're really playing with fire here, doing what we're doing with all this politicking with our schools.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I always thought education and law and order, this should be two areas where there should be no politics. It should be the same common interest, because this is important for all communities, everybody. So if you look at the mask mandates and everything, just the flip of a dime, you know, you saw that their policies changed because they know that it's politically hurting. Now all the unions and associations want to open the schools. So, you know, this is extreme politicization of the education, in, you know, as a domain that we see, and that has to stop. We know.
I agree. And Vincent, I hope that to whatever degree people are watching this, people who are out there listening to our message and who have like-mindedness to us, they need to get out there. They need to run for these school board seats. I know it doesn't sound, I mean, you guys have done it before, and I appreciate your efforts. You know, and most people, they don't understand how difficult it can be, and it's a lot of sacrifice, but there's a lot at stake here right now. And this shouldn't stand. You know, you're politicizing our health, you're politicizing our businesses, you're politicizing everything. It's like, you know what? When are you gonna just stop? And if there's ever a stopping point, I think it's with our kids. I don't want anybody politicizing my kids.
Exactly.
So Sang, I think you spoke really well. As a healthcare professional, I can tell you, I was always told that whether you're a janitor or you're a healthcare executive sitting in a suit that never touch a patient, or you're a bedside nurse, if anybody asks you why are you coming to work, you should say to take care of patient. If you're a school board member, or if you're a janitor, or you're a clerk, or you're an admin assistant in a school, why are you in school? To educate the child. It doesn't matter what your role is. School board is not there to indoctrinate. I think you used a very kind word, which is influence. I would use the word indoctrinate. We are not sending our children so they could get indoctrinated, educate. It's like we are worried about academic achievement of Latino and Black children. We are worried too. We want the minority achievement gap to reduce. That is good for the nation, good for our children. They're our children too. We want everyone to succeed. We are all God's children. Everyone needs to succeed. And that's what we put the school board for. So no, thank you you are our hope, Sang. You're a young man, you are our hope. You have accomplished in Fairfax City. That is a highly liberal Northern Virginia jurisdiction. It's incredible. You won a seat on the executive council, that too twice in a row. as we are coming to the end of the conversation, Sang, we can't thank you enough. You have two little kids in the house. You have better things to do on a Friday evening. You are on a streak as a winning tradition. You have employed, obviously, techniques. You're very sincere. Community sees that. We see that. And you're an inspiration for people like me and Vincent. Is there anything else that we missed talking to you that you would like to tell us? Please go ahead and do that. A lot of the listeners are very appreciative of your thoughts. I see a lot of comments on Facebook that are coming through that are talking about you and your leadership skills. But I'm sure we are missing some things that if you want to share, this is the time.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for those kind remarks. I really appreciate you guys and what you do with this. I really do mean that. And this conversation's been great. I will say one other thing about children and our schools and the minority achievement gaps. You know, when I was in my 20s, I spent several years volunteer tutoring at an inner city school. It was actually even a public charter school. And I remember there was this one child I worked with often, and he was I think there was about fourth grade or something like that. And he said every day he had a hard time focusing at school. And I asked him one day, I said, why are you always so, lacking of focus? And he said, because I'm hungry. It broke my heart. And I said, what did you have for lunch? Doesn't school? He said, yeah, I had lunch. And I said, well, what'd you have for breakfast? And he said, I had an orange popsicle stick for breakfast. Because his grandmother, he didn't live with his parents, he lived with his grandmother. That's all she gave him in the mornings. And I asked him, I said, what are you going to do when you finish elementary school and you go to middle school? What are you going to do? Are you going to go to college? And he said, nobody's ever talked to me about college. I said, so what are you going to do when you are a grown-up? And he said, well, maybe I can play basketball. I said, but you can't even stay awake for a little math tutoring session. I don't know how you're going to play basketball, And I think about him in this context of, critical race theory or all these things that we're talking about, or, renaming a school. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't, improvements to be made in terms of racial, guidance and things like that. But I really want to know, Vincent, you mentioned earlier about getting to the root cause of things as an engineer. Are these things going to help that child? I mean, he's not even a kid anymore. He's a grown up now, a grown adult. But were those things going to help him? Was that going to make him, have a full belly so he can pay better attention at school and learn these subjects? That's tragic. And the fact that we're talking about these things and spending so much money, I know that's DC and not Fairfax, but there are other kids like that around here too, and we're talking about spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars, putting up a new mascot on school, and there are children like that out there. I think that's a crime. And to me, it's inexcusable. And they can, virtue signal, and they can talk about all these other things and tell me how you're going to make that child's life better because he's African American, and if you do all these things, it'll even the playing field. No, absolutely not. That's not what does it. And I wish people would think about that kind of stuff, And for me, and I'm sorry, go ahead, Sri.
It's a crime that Sang, we decide to pay Ibrahim Kendi, I believe, a guy for teaching in our class thousands of dollars when we have children that can get reduced lunch for teaching a critical race theory class. So where are our priorities? I mean, it's a crime that we end up paying school name changes thousands of dollars when we have children that can't study because they don't have lunch. That's
one school name change. One school name change is about $1.5 million. Okay, I studied that when I ran for school board.
So those are the things that we prioritize on. So that's where I think our priorities needs to be, and that's a problem with our school board, that they don't have the priorities right.
Yeah, and I think, Vincent, some of the prices differ between high school and middle and elementary schools. Elementary schools are definitely cheaper, but that goes to the point about when you're an educator, it doesn't matter if you're a janitor at the school or if you're the principal at the school, every day that mentality should be, what is my mission? And that's these students, right? And the school board members, that's what they should be thinking, right? What am I doing? Is this action going to help students tomorrow? What is the impact of me doing this? And again, I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I don't think any of us are saying that. And I'm not saying that any of us want, not to talk about racism. It's an important topic. It's an important conversation in a very diverse country. That's why we have that conversation, and it's good to have that conversation. But what can I do today? And this is, I'll wrap this up with this, in the city of Fairfax, I think about what's going to happen to the residents here tomorrow if I make this decision this way or that way. And right now, what do we need? We need small businesses to recuperate. We need schools to open. We need people to hopefully secure themselves financially so that this impending, inflation or, further job losses, and actually, well, there's not really a job loss problem right now. It's people are having a hard time finding employees. My parents are small business owners, and they're willing to pay over minimum wage, but because of the policies of this White House and because of how they're doling out taxpayer dollars, some people don't even want to work anymore. We're disincentivizing work. These are big problems, right? And so anyway, I'll end with this. We got to keep the most important things, our priorities first. And, we can't get sidetracked by these other types of things. And hopefully our elected officials and hopefully our residents, the bosses, the real bosses, they're important people who have important lives. That's why they don't run for office, because they're important and they have a lot of real things to do. And so they should be telling their employees, the elected officials, this is what I want. This is what I need you to do.
And Sang, when we have these conversations or whatever we write on Facebook or social media, one thing we have noticed is, a lot of these hardcore liberal folks are watching and carefully kind of bringing out anything that can portray us in a bad light and promoting it. So I'm assuming that they are going to listen to this conversation also. So I'm just telling the people who are really serious about taking care of the achievement gap. We, 3 Asian Americans, are sitting. Have you guys ever asked this Asian American community how you guys do this? Okay, we have some lessons to tell you as serious partners in education, how to improve the pipeline, how to get these Hispanic children and African American children who are suffering into this pipeline. We have solid solutions. So instead of just destroying what we got, let us engage with all the communities and understand how some community do it better than the other community, instead of dividing the community, and learn from those lessons, and let us make the education better. We discussed a lot about education. That's why I thought, that is very important to pitch to the other side as well in this conversation. And Sang, I was watching you. This is the time I am having the longest time of a conversation with you, even though I've met you many times. And I'm so impressed with your sincerity and your commitment to the job, always reminding yourself whom I am working for. I'm very, very, really impressed as a proud Asian American partner from the same community. I really wish you all the very best in terms of, becoming a leader who can influence bigger things in our community and in our society. So, and Sri, you can actually, tell what you feel. I'm really, really very made me so proud that you on the conversation and getting to know more of, your thoughts.
Thank you, Vincent. And, we have to remember that the solutions start with these conversations. And if there are, people who are of a different political ideology watching us right now or watching it later to scrub this to politically hurt you, me, or whoever, so be it. But I would say this to them: I'm open to a sincere conversation any day of the week, anytime, all the time. I think tonight when the county party tweeted something out, somebody was already out there ridiculing our names, because they said that we should change our names to more Anglo names, And they said, oh, how could they possibly win with names like that? You know, they have to win in the Republican Party because it's so racist. They have to have Anglo names. And I think they said that I should change my name to Sean Yi. And you know, those types of people, they're not serious people. They're not here for real conversation. I don't have time for them. But I will say this to that one guy, you know, since he did want to write earlier today, you know, I didn't win the Fairfax City election twice as Sean Yi. I wanted a Sang Yi, and I'll stay a Sang Yi, and I'll die a Sang Yi. And there's nothing to be ashamed of having a Korean name. And if that's what the other side wants to pick on because they think that my name's not Anglo enough for my political ideology, I think that they have a lot more education that they need to receive. And maybe that's part of the problem too, is maybe they've learned wrong things at school because our school board decided to focus on the wrong things.
So Councilman Sanghi, we are extremely proud of you. And it's unfortunate that that's the party that's called as tolerant group.
Yeah.
It's kind of unfortunate, but we are very proud of you. I always say when they take the low route, we take the high route, right? And we will see you in a bigger and better place. I can tell you that for sure. I can only foresee that. I see a true leader in you. That being said, we are going to conclude that here. We thank you. And Vincent, I thank you as always. Vincent puts a lot of work into these conversations. I thank you both. And for our audience, please tune into Fairfax County Republican Committee Facebook page right here again on Sunday, May 16th at 5 p.m. to listen to Ms. Julie Perry. She's running for House District 86. Ms. Perry will discuss issues affecting Fairfax County and her constituents. See you all. God bless you all. And we will catch up later. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you, Sang.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Sri. Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.